Welcome back to Sunrise. We're switching to something else. Well, no, last case we're talking about trust, building the Nigerian people. Well, the humanitarian situation in Nigeria has spilled over from the northeast. Yes, indeed, it has spread across the country, but the most hit part, northeast, has spread into the Lake Chad area. In the northeast alone, you have about 7.7 million people needing humanitarian assistance in the worst affected states of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe State. Food security, nutrition situation remains extremely fragile across that area, particularly given the high levels of dependency compounded by lack of access to land and other livelihood opportunities. Now, that is in the northeast. But spread across the country, you have issues of flooding, now causing people to lose their homes. You have issues of insecurity here and there, so people are displaced and moving to one place to one internally displaced person's camp or the other, and all these people need some level of humanitarian assistance or the other. So what would you say has been the impact of humanitarian efforts in the country, across the country? To help us look at this, we have joining us in our Abuja studio, we have Gada Hatim, a country representative, Solidarity is International. Thank you for joining us. Here in Lagos, we have Oyebisi Oluseyi, Executive Director, Network of Nigerian NGOs. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Will be joining us via Skype later on. Emmanuel Asemeka, who is a Country Director, Social Welfare Network Initiative. He's in Borno State, and he'll be joining us in the course of the conversation. So let's start with you, Gada Hatim.
Hoping that he has power in Borno.
Well, I think he has managed to find some level of power, but we'll find out as we get along. Mr. Tim, what would you say has been the level of humanitarian aid and impact across the country so far?
Well, so far, let's start by the northeast of Nigeria, where there is the majority, or most of us actually, as international humanitarian organization over there to respond to the ongoing crisis. Our presence is between Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa State. These are the most affected, with Borno remain to be the epicenter of the crisis. So far, there is huge efforts have been deployed. I talked today on behalf of 42 organizations. This is the non-governmental organizations. And then you add to that all the UN agencies and local organizations and others. With efforts so far trying to reach, as you mentioned, 7.7 million people who had been affected by the crisis. Only for this year so far, around 3.9 people had been receiving food or food vouchers. 3 million people are having access to education, and similar numbers are having access to quality drinking water and to latrines and wash facilities. Still, there is huge needs out there. It's very important to keep in mind that we are working in an ongoing conflict. Displacement is still happening. Reception of families who are managed to flee or had certain areas is going on a weekly basis. So this effort is still continuing, and I think there is still a lot to be done. The other important point to keep in mind is that the number that we are mentioning and talk about is in the capital of LGAs where we can access. There is still other areas beyond that we don't know what's the condition of the population over there. Although those who are arriving from these locations, their conditions indicate that the humanitarian situation there is quite dire. So there is still a lot to be done. It's a challenging environment. There is difficulties to sustain our presence in certain areas as the situation is moving swiftly. Some areas that we had access to until last week, today we cannot. We have to go back and maintain our presence from other locations. It's a continuous effort, it's a joint effort between all those different actors. And I think we still need to continue. The road is still long. And so many people out there are still in dire need.
Okay, Mr. Oluseyi, 42 organizations in the Northeast alone. She's talking about providing all sorts of aid, medical aid, food aid, even emotional aid as well. I believe that's also happening. Do you think it's been effective?
Well, I think the 42 she's referring to would have to do with the international NGOs. The information we have as Nigerian network of NGOs is that we have around 200 local NGOs also supporting the 42 that you have on ground. Of course, you know this is being coordinated by the United Nations. But when you look at the magnitude of the problem that we have, you just reeled out the statistics, 7.7 million. Of the 7.7 million, she mentioned issues around access. You know, those working in the Northeast at this time are only been able to access areas where the conflict is not going on. And recall that we've been having this conflict for 10 years, ongoing. Every week there are issues. So of the 7.7 million, the statistics we have access to is telling us that about 2 million of those would need education. For instance, another 2 million, over 2 million would need water and sanitation. But out of those, the effort at this time is only reaching over 300,000. Again, which is not enough. A funding need of about over 300,000 of over 2 million that would need education.
Okay.
And of over 2 million that would need water and sanitation. And a budget of $1.7 billion or something is needed for all of the efforts, whereas $607 million is being accessed. So when you look at these gaps, these are realities in terms of the efforts.
Now,
Okay.
we were told some time ago that peace had returned to certain areas and the state governments were making efforts to actually bring people back from camps back to their, well, places of abode, you know, building new estates for them and all that. How is that going?
What I do know is that from August 2015, again, based on the data available, is that 1.5 million have, been able to return back to their lives.
Okay.
But again,
so
that's out of the
7.7 minus 1.0.
That is what I'm not able to immediately say now. But what I do know is that report says that 1.5 million have been able to return since August 2015.
Okay. We have someone who is there in Borno right now, Osemeka, and he's one of the local NGOs. Osemeka, how many people of the 7.7 would you say have been aided back to normalcy in the Northeast?
Oh dear.
Okay, we'll get back to Emmanuel Osemeka, who is in Borno State right now. But let's get back to you, Hatim. You've reeled out some figures. You've talked about the challenge of maintaining presence, especially accessibility, accessing the people, accessing the areas. But if you have over 200 local NGOs supporting 42 international NGOs, how is it that it's so difficult to access these people, especially in the interiors?
Well, the difficulty of access when it's linked to security, I don't see the difference between international and national organization. We all face the same challenges. The idea is that to be able to reach people in need without risking our lives. And if you talk about those 42 organizations which are working in the Northeast, we do not work with international staff entirely, not at all. The ratio even could be like 1 to 10. We depend mainly on our Nigerian colleagues in reaching and assisting us in identifying these areas and go to provide assistance. But that does not mean that either of us are risking our lives. So the idea is that to maintain our presence and to try to continue to find ways to reach those who are in need. But at a certain point, you will discover that there is no way further. Either we have to stay where we are and wait for the people, which is happening as well. People who are managing to flee the certain situation or certain conditions or certain territory, they will reach safe haven and we will be able to provide assistance. In some situation, the areas which are safe locations, which are most of the time the capital of LG is, IDPs will continue, internally displaced people will continue to arrive. Some of these locations, and after 4 years, let's say, of displacement, the host communities are also enduring very difficult living conditions today.